It's a very interesting argument to speak about whether or not this is the greatest font of all time, because you already have to put up some things to measure this.
How do you run a type foundry? What's the first thing you should know?
I really wouldn't go through the struggle because it's such a lot of work. I created BlazeType because I didn't find any foundry that had the concept of distributing and the licensing and the easy access to font that we push forward with BlazeType.
What goes into then the business side of deciding what typeface you should be making next?
So nothing like that existed because there's inspiration in everything around and the world is full of surprise.
What is your least favorite typeface that you designed and that somebody else has designed?
Wow. That's a tough one.
Welcome to another episode of the Shaping Design Podcast, where we talk to designers from all walks of life and discuss their stories, strategies, and tactics so that you can become a better designer. I'm your host and guacamole inhaler, Mitchell Bernstein. Today we had a very special guest, Matthieu Salvaggio, who's the founder and head of BlazeType, a type foundry. And as a type enthusiast myself, I tried to skip some of the more common questions about typography, like what's the difference between a typeface and a font. But if you're new to this area of design, don't worry, you're still gonna find this interesting. We went into so much detail about the business of typography, about running a type foundry, about how we decide to sell the right typeface, et cetera, et cetera. Amazing, really a great podcast. You gotta listen to it. Also, we're doing a little contest to win a copy of Matthieu's book, which teaches you step by step on how to make a typeface. And if you want it for free, listen up. We'll be giving it away to 3 lucky winners. All you gotta do is you gotta take a screenshot of giving us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts, write a review, and then mention that screenshot to me on Twitter at Mitch Bernstein. And before we dive in, I just want to say I launched a Framer template. You can check it out in the description below and quickly spin up your documentation hub for your web app or company in seconds. And as always, we want to thank Framer for sponsoring this podcast, so go check out the link in the description if you want a major discount off of your next Framer site. And please like and subscribe to the podcast wherever you're watching or listening to this, whether it's YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or Substack, wherever it is. Subscribe, like, share. It helps us grow and it helps us keep giving you great free things. Now, here's my conversation with Matthieu Salvaggio. Thanks for coming on the pod.
For sure.
Can I ask, and this is very embarrassing, how do I pronounce your name?
That's the classic question. Everybody in the US usually asks me that, so no worries. You can call me Matt. Makes it
Matt.
things easier.
Okay. But I want to know, how do you actually pronounce your name?
In French?
Yes.
That would be Matthieu.
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 I'm never gonna get this. Matthieu.
The Che is kind of hard thing to pronounce for English speakers. Yeah. But you can go Matthieu or Matt. Either is fine.
Okay.
With me.
Matt it is.
Yeah.
We'll work on it. We'll work on it.
Sure.
How you doing? What's going on? You got an email saying, hey, why don't you come on to the pod from another former guest, Paul?
Mm-hmm.
What were your thoughts on that originally?
About the podcast?
Yeah.
The podcast with Paul or me being here?
Well, both actually.
Both.
but you coming on the pod.
Okay. Well, it's always I always like talking about type and anything related about that. So I was excited to be part of such ventures. So pretty excited. Yeah. I mean, it's cool to speak about design and stuff. So,
you haven't done. I couldn't really find too much stuff. But it seems like the internet was really excited for this podcast.
Oh.
A lot of questions from our listeners, so we'll probably get more into those in a minute.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to give you the opportunity to kind of give your spiel of who you are, what you do, and where you're at now.
Okay, the big questions.
Yeah.
So my name is Matthieu. I'm the founder of BlazeType. She's a a type design company um, focusing on designing viable fonts and for our retail catalog and custom fonts for different clients. It's based in France. Uh, we're between Lyon and Marseille mostly, though I do spend sometimes in Paris as well. Um, and like it's always hard to explain, not to explain, but to describe exactly what it is that we do. Like we try to be um, very contemporary in the way we design fonts. We are very keen on the technical aspects of the font themselves, because as you know, fonts are pieces of design for sure, but it mostly software in reality. So we do spend a lot of time on the technical aspects of the software to make it work as best as possible on any platform. And, the viable font thing is kind of even though it's not that young, it's still a new kind of technology, and still being implemented. So we do spend a lot of time on making the viable fonts behave properly across platforms.
So, okay, so basically, just to recap, you run an- a type foundry,
Mhm.
and you create custom fonts for clients, but also you have fonts that are more affordable for plebes like myself and my colleagues to be able to afford.
Yeah.
And these are, and for those who are listening, full disclosure, I did buy your font pack
Oh,
because
nice.
I fell in love with it after Paul suggested it. I was like, yeah, I gotta get this, and it's really good.
Oh, sure.
Um, so I want to dive into specifically in the beginning of this podcast, the business side of running a type foundry and how that operates. And feel free to say no to any question you feel uncomfortable answering or you don't want to talk about. So I'm not going to force you to say anything you don't want to say, but I think the
Oh,
listeners would really love to know about this kind of stuff.
I don't think he'll be asking anything we don't want to answer
Yeah, sure.
usually. So I'm pretty open with anything, especially with the business aspect of the foundry, because a lot of people are interested about the business aspect of running a design, um, but most don't really know to do that. So I usually give free advices or show people how to do stuff. So I'm completely open talking about it.
Awesome. Actually, let's dive right in. So,
Uh,
how do you run a type foundry? What's the first thing you should know?
About like launching your own foundry.
Yeah.
All right. So I guess it will depend on two different factors. First is one, are you a type designer or are you like a business person trying to make a buck out of type design? Because there's two way of approaching this, right? Um, but let's talk more about let's say like you're a type designer and you want to have your own platform for any reason. Um, so, 100% honest right now, if I was young again, like, I wouldn't launch a foundry right now.
Why?
Um, well, when I launched Blaze Type, it was like 6 or 7 years ago. The market was completely different. Um, Especially about the licensing part of it. So I created Blaze Type because I didn't find any foundry that had the concept of distributing and the licensing and the easy access to the font that we push forward with Blaze Type. So nothing like that existed. Most of the foundries around were this kind of dull is not the word, but they were very classic in terms of what they would offer in terms of font. Aside from maybe 2 or 3 foundries, most were very keen on designing classic fonts like your sans serif like, your Times like, and stuff like that. But back then there was not a lot of competition in terms of having super cool, super good licensing for people. And now it's the case. Like we have a lot of different foundries. Dynamo has crazy cool kind of licensing. Um, Nan is a very good one that I recently released. I think we have a pretty decent one as well. So that's plus the fact that there's a lot of different companies around that offer the possibility for youngsters to design and develop and produce and distribute display fonts or first font and etc. And I think it will be wiser to drop your design in different foundries that you like, try to build yourself up, and maybe okay, if you really want to have your own place, do it. um but I really wouldn't go through the struggle because it's such a lot of work.
Wait, but like, but what? What's so much work about it?
Well, okay, so if we put aside the whole website aspect of it, because like if you go on the website of BlazeType, for example, like you have the design and everything, and we try to make it as smooth as possible. So you click on the font, you click on the license you want, you purchase it, and you receive it, and everything is cool and perfect. But if you see the back office of it, it's super complex because you're dealing with data, with personal data. So there's a lot of laws about that. Um, you obviously have to work with lawyers for the licensing part of it. Uh, French IP, something, English IP, something, USA IP, something. So you have to
Hmm.
work a bit around that. You're handling money, so obviously you have to be super good on the tax and the VAT and the distribution of that. And that's just like the boring stuff, right? Um, you're not. You still have to promote the website, promote the work, find designers, hire them, produce, distribute. So there's like it's a lot of work. That plus designing your own stuff and making money until your company is making enough, and have this kind of snowball thing going on.
Well, it sounds a lot like running just like a regular design agency, where you hire designers to create work for other people. Except this, you're creating something that can be reproduced and sold to a lot of people, and that one thing actually might take a really long time to make.
Yes. So about the timing of the creation of a font, it really depends because you sometimes you have font families that are very display like and that can be easily designed. Like I mean, by easily I mean someone who knows his way around it in a month or less. You can have a typeface font. Um, but depending on the complexity of the design, it can take several months, several years, and sometimes you see like even us sometimes we release stuff and say like after 4 years of development, it doesn't really mean that we spent 4 years on a daily basis working on the project. But sometimes a good thing to do with retail font is to create a few glyphs and let them rest somewhere and open them back a month later and rebuild on it. And you do that back and forth until you have a core thing in the typeface that is good. And then you move forward with the whole development.
It really
Um,
sounds like you're taking it almost like a ceramic like item, like you put it into the kiln, you let it burn, and then you know after it's kind of like it's cooled off, then you're able to do more stuff with it. That's kind of a cool like perspective on. I never really heard of anyone saying, "Yeah, you just throw it out there, you leave it for a little bit, and then you come back to it later."
it's
That's interesting that you
cooking.
said that.
It's
Yeah,
that's also like I know Paul wanted to know why we were named Blaze.
yeah.
But it's related to that. Like back in the old days, foundries, like the term foundry is an historical term because obviously we don't melt um, metal to have type metal in type,
Mm.
but we still call ourselves blah blah foundry. Um, but yeah, back then you still had to melt the metal into type and everything. So you had this kind of uh, hot and cold kind of process, liquid metal becoming cold type. But nowadays, you don't have this hot and cold aspect of the design, of course, but type is since the viable technology and the multiple masters that we design, I feel like type is more of a liquid matter right now than this static file, you know?
I was actually going to ask you about why you named it Blaze Type, and I thought it was like a 420 reference, like a joke or something.
420, what is that?
Yeah, like you're blazing up, like.
I know.
I was like, why is it called? Okay, I guess. I mean, I don't know. But okay, that actually makes more sense, and it's actually a lot more sincere.
Mm,
Um, so okay, so the business side of handling the foundry is, similar to other businesses where there's a lot of headache and trying to manage people, manage clients and customers, data and legal stuff. But what about like the actual like typeface itself? You mentioned briefly that you said you do a couple glyphs and you put it on the shelf, but like what goes into then the business side of deciding what typeface you should be making next? Like is it a marketing thing? Is it is there a need in the market you
mm,
see and you're like, you know what, I'm gonna do something that fits like a grotesque that people are really gravitating towards or something like
mm.
that?
That's a very good question. Um, it depends on whoever is running the foundry, right? Um, for example, the area font family that we have on Blaze, uh, I designed this font family because like I was looking at the different font in use that we had from people, and we had a lot of people using our fonts for display usage, but they would match the font with a different grotesque or sans serif to have the kind of balance. And usually they wouldn't match it with cert or the other scents that we had, sorry. So I decided to design something that could be that uh, quiet but still warm kind of font family that you could match with all the different typeface display that we have. And in that manner, Area was designed as more of a like filling a gap in the Foundry catalog. But aside from Area, most of the designs we have and most of the typeface that we release, like we don't do a background analysis of the market on what's there, what's missing, and what's the trend. We just design stuff. And most of the things that are released are like either me or Leon, someone stumble across a very good designer with a good project and we're like, oh wow, this is amazing. Like, we want to release this. And we don't really care much about like whether or not it's going to work in terms of money, like we just want to have a super cool product. And if it's good, maybe it sell. I don't know. Like it's I think that when you start thinking too much about what you need to do to make money with your products, like you kind of lose it in a way, like because there's like it's not rocket science. Like if you want to make money, design sans serif and grotesque, like everybody does. But at some point, is that the thing that drives you the most? Is that like did you word all these years analyzing how fonts are just to wake up every morning and design sans serif?
So let me ask you this then. Which is your most popular typeface?
So first, then you would have to explain to me what you mean by popular.
Most bought.
What's both?
Yeah, which one was most purchased?
Um, I don't have the recent data, but I think Area is definitely
Aria.
the one that is the most used. Um, but I think
And
the most popular is Apoc, for example.
really,
Yeah.
how would you define popularity then?
Well, I would define it by like what's in the. Uh, I don't think I have the English word for that, but the some to me, something that is popular is something that I see often, right? Because Apoc, for example, for a lot of years was very popular among uh, students, young designers, and designers were keen on using display fonts.
Mhm.
So at some point, like I remember talking with friends in the US, saying like telling me that they see the font everywhere every day. Um, but it was behaving correctly in terms of sales, but it's not the kind of licensing big tech companies are going to buy, right? You're not going
Right.
to use APOC for an app, for example.
Okay. I mean,
So,
it would be rare for them to start to steer away and use a different typeface for a specific campaign because then it strays away from their brand and then become unrecognizable for that brand to use a special typeface for one instance, right?
well, I don't know. It depends on the brand, really. Like, you have some brands that are completely open to using different fonts on every campaign that they do and still maintain something coherent, I guess. Um, because it's like a one shot. Like let's have a poster for our next event that is going to happen once a year or something like that. It's not a big deal to change your font and stuff like that. But what I mean is you have what I call system font, which are the fonts that a company is going to use on a daily basis. Uh, them, their users, their employees, their colleagues, whatever. And for the day-to-day needs, it's kind of hard to work with super expressive display fonts because not everyone is a designer and not everyone can easily go around using fonts like that. I think that's also why um, big companies tend to go with the safest option, which is usually, a cool, by cool, I mean like well done, well designed font family, like a quiet serif or a classic grotesque or neo grotesque. And because they're in the end, like we are all used to to use these fonts.
Mhm.
So, it's familiar, so it's easy to go around.
So, when you're thinking about creating a new typeface, are you trying to then draw inspiration from things that you see and then go, I kind of like that. Let's do something similar to that. Or do you just have like, guys, I have a great idea for a new typeface. I just want to build it, see what happens. I'll throw it out there, see if people like it. Cause like I'm looking at the first one you mentioned, Area,
Hmm.
and that one has 88 styles behind it.
Hmm.
I'm assuming that's like the weights, right?
Yeah.
And variations of that. And that's like a lot to
Yeah.
begin with. Like let's be real. That's actually quite an investment to do. And so you really got to be committed to doing that. And I guess now that typeface has become very versatile. Whereas APOC has 26 styles to it. And although it's probably what you said the most popular one, or at least most recently popular one, it's not as versatile in its styling. So
So,
I guess like yeah, well, what do you think about that?
so, like you need to have the full story also behind these two fonts. Like
Yeah, yeah, please
you
share.
see 26 styles of APOC. Actually, we updated the font family like a couple months ago, and before that it was 12 style. And when I released the font family in 2018 January, it was 3 styles. So it's not really about the number of styles per se. APOC at first, there was APOC Revelations, APOC Dark, and Italic, and that was about it. And it did a massive hit in any case. Area is a completely different story because when I started working on the font family, I worked on the regular master, and I was happy with the whole thing, and I decided like, okay, we need to expand this towards something larger. Let's design the black master so we have an interpolation and have different styles there. Okay, do the same thing with something thinner. All right, and it's always a question, a back and forth question and answer. Like at some point, I decided, okay, it would be interesting to have extended glyphs as well because I personally love using them in text and display. So okay, let's have extended. And okay, the font family is behaving good, but what about people who want to use them in super tiny size? Okay, let's do an ink trap version then. And for example, Aria is very non-conventional in the way the weights are being done, because there's 11 weights per category, so you have 11 weights on the classic normal, then the italic, then the extended, then the ink traps. That's why you have so many styles. But it was designed and decided this way because the idea of Aria is to represent what viable is. When you have a very viable font, you can have something very linear in the way the weight will behave. You can change that and have something that scales. But I really like this kind of super smooth growing from one way to the other, and the static files of Area try to represent that. So that's why you have this very thin thing going on in the static. And so when you have all the styles together, you see this kind of waterfall of weight evolution. So they were really designed in different manner and for different purpose. Sometimes we have, like, for example, a recent release that we have is Sort Rounded. I thought it would be funny to have a rounded version of Sort. So Tim and Leon work on that. And if you compare Sort Rounded to the classic Sort, there is a difference in the amount of styles. Sort Rounded has less styles than the classic Sort because the round version on some super thin weights doesn't make any sense. It doesn't show. So we decided to remove them.
Okay, so it's really contextual towards the typeface. Got it. Okay. But you mentioned something really interesting is that you went back to typefaces you were already released and you continued and added more to them.
Oh yeah.
So are these typefaces living? Do they breathe? Do they they have a life of their own? Of course, you put it out to the world, 5 people buy it, but then you came back and you updated them. Why?
Because it's fun.
That's a good answer. That's fine. That's awesome.
No, I mean
I approve that.
it's not only about fun, but it's how you're a graphic designer or a director, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. So do you sometimes look back at the work you did like a year or 5 years ago?
I look back at the work I did yesterday.
Okay. How do you feel about it?
I hate everything I've done.
So I don't have that. My feelings are not that strong toward the work we
Yeah.
do, but your eye evolves. It gets better. You're more keen to some details. You get better at your job if you're caring from it. And sometimes you design something and you're like, man, this is super good. I love it. Let's put it up there. And a week later, when I see it, I'm like, maybe we can improve this. Maybe we can improve that. Okay. So what I do is I make a list of things that we can improve. And sometimes we make shadow release, I call them. It's we update things. We don't tell anyone. We don't promote it. We sell emails to the people who have bought it saying okay, we updated the font, get the newest update because all the update, when you buy a font, you get all the future updates for free. And we update all the font families on a yearly basis. That's a lot of work.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And you have a lot of typefaces, so that's a lot of work.
Yeah, we do have a lot now. But the technical standards evolves as well. You have decisions coming up on some font families. You have new additions to Unicode. You have, some things are changing in the software we use to design fonts. So, we sometimes you just have to reopen the file, change a few things, and re-export the fonts. But yeah, I mean, since we want to have most of the font families we share as variables, we have to get back to some of them and make them better sometimes. And there is always the possibility of us missing something. Like it's a lot of work, it's a lot of glyphs, it's a lot of churning and hinting and blah blah blah. So you at some point you miss something and you realize that like a week or so later and you have to update it. It's rare. We try to make our investigation on everything that can be weird in the font family, in the way it behaves, but sometimes like mistakes happen.
This is a weird question. What do you think about variable typefaces? Because if you're designing specifically so many styles and different weights for a typeface, wouldn't you just set it as a variable and say, go at it, have fun, y'all? First of all, actually, for those who are listening, maybe we should explain what a variable typeface is,
Yeah.
or like the version of what a variable font is, and then go from there.
Okay. So, it's the auto promo time. There's a whole chapter about variable fonts and what they are in their core in the book we released on Learn Type.
And I'll put that in the show notes for those who are listening.
Awesome. To make it simple, the difference between a static file and a variable file. So when you purchase a font family, you have, let's say, Aria, and Aria is the name of the font family. And then you have different weights: Aria regular, bold italic, etc. And all of these are static files that you can install on their own. So you can install Aria regular, Aria bold, Aria bold italic. Okay. A variable file is a single file that contains all the different styles of the font family. So for the example of Aria and the 88 styles it has, you would have 88 styles in the variable font. So the variable font, what is kind of awesome about it is like you have all the different static files that you can select and use, but you also have the possibility to have anything that is in between those styles. So because you give mathematical values to the weight, the italic, etc. So for instance, a regular weight value is 400, and the bold is 700, if I remember correctly. Let's say you just have a variable font with two statics inside it. You have the regular and you have the bold, but you can switch in between. Maybe you say like the regular is too thin for me and the bold is too bold, but 553 is perfect for my design. So you scale it exactly to that point and you use it. That's what is super exciting to me, is giving the designers the possibility to tweak their tool. Because you can obviously use the statics that we design because we think they're good and it's the standards and you can definitely work with them. But giving you guys the possibility to choose exactly what you need is like the cherry on top of the vanilla.
Thank you for that explanation. That was very insightful for people who don't understand.
Cheers.
So what's your thoughts on then selling that instead of doing all the styles and selling them individually?
Okay, so I don't want to spoil too much stuff, but we are working on something in that manner.
Okay, you heard it here, folks. First, it was here.
Yeah, true. True.
Okay, cool. Okay, then I'll move on from that. Yeah, so like I said, we talk a lot about the business, and that was actually originally asked from some of our audience, Rahul, previous guest of the pod. He actually asked another interesting question. Where did you get the inspiration to create Apoc?
Oh, So I work with a guy called Sebastian, with he writes most of the different articles that we have on Blaze Type. And we've met years ago, and back then, like about 10 years ago, I don't know, we were talking with another dude called Pierre, and Pierre had shown me like this iPhone taken photo of a cover with a title, like engraved title with ligatures and in like cross letters and super weird shapes. Apocalypse de Saint Jean, which is the revelations of John. And I was like, oh man, this is super good. Like I love the design of it. So I just did, basic digital pen and tool stuff on the design, and then I looked at it like, oh, that's very interesting. Like, okay, maybe I can change the whole thing and isolate and make letters. So it was really weird. Like you had like the super small O, a very large P, and in between letters, etc. So it was definitely not looking good at first. But like it has this super weird kind of serifs, and it's like the shapes were odd in a way. So I started working on the glyphs and the letters, and I just had this basic set of capitals, and like most of the capitals aside from the apocalypse were invented because I just had a few letters, so I had to imagine what the others would be. And then I started imagining what would be the lowercase of these capitals, what would be the match in lowercase, and then what would be the punctuation of this, and then what would be the numbers, and what would be the parentheses, and so on. And then voila, you have the Apoc revelation. And years later, I asked Sebastian to find, because I had lost this piece of photo, and I asked him like to find it, and if he managed to have more information about it, to write an article, do something about it. So he has worked on something, a large, very large piece of paper that explain the whole backstory. And this is super interesting because I designed the font family without any knowledge of this huge rabbit hole that was this just photo of a paper sheet. Like I cannot tell more because the article is not online yet. We have to solve some issues before releasing it. But I will be sure to send you a link when it's up. It should be up, I hope, by the end of January. But the story is insane.
Wow.
It's crazy.
Okay, cool. We're gonna have to keep a tab on that and come back to that
Awesome.
one. But that gets me to my next part of this podcast. How do you actually design a typeface? What do you start with?
That's a good question. So obviously there is to each their own, and everyone has their own method, their own way of doing stuff. But I will share you my way of work. I do stretch some stuff on paper sometimes, but most of the time I work directly on the computer. So what I start to do, the first glyphs I always work on are very basic toward what you learn when you want to do typeface design. I always start with either a lowercase n or a lowercase o, move to a capital H, capital O. And these four
Why?
glyphs,
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, these four glyphs give you all the informations that you need in terms of width of the letters, in terms of stem thickness in the vertical or the horizontal stems. Gives you all the information you need in terms of contrast, in terms of the eight of the different lowercase or the eight of the capitals, the relationship between the capitals and the lowercase in terms of size. It gives you all the information that you need in terms of tension, because all the other letters of the alphabet are derivative of these in a way. For example, if you have your capital H, let's say, so you have your vertical stems and you have your horizontal stem, right? If you have those, then you can easily design a capital E, it's, and if you have that, you can design your F. The F is not like just removing these parts. It's like you have to put this one below, change a few sizes.
For those who are not listening, or who are only listening and not watching, he's using his hands to
Yeah.
describe the different letters. So it might be confusing for people who are listening, but keep going. I'll add notes to the pod.
Then you can like, and it's like designing type is like a puzzle game. Like, like if you have this piece and this piece, then you can find this one. And if you have this one plus this one, you can find this one. And it's an ongoing process. Like, but I really like to think of it as a discussion. Like, if my C and my O are this way, and my H and my L and my E are this way, what should be my B? And if I my B, what should be the P? And all is the R related to that. And like it's like back in questions and answers to all the different shapes. And it's kind of funny when you hear type designers looking at the font and discussing, because sometimes like it's not only about like, does this make sense? It's more like, do you think it's a good answer to the whole discussion? um but yeah, like you have your core glyphs that you want to design first, and once they are done, like you have the basic round that you need to design the whole font family. And what's awesome is at some point when you're a bit experienced with uh, with this work, just looking at a few glyphs, you can already picture the whole thing. And this is why it's becoming even greater to work in this field. Is not only do you see what the full family would look like, but you also picture where it should go as well, like the different weights and the different styles it will have, and why it's going to be good to have these different styles, because of the, like, you try to picture the whole process forward.
Okay, so that's how you start. Then how do you know when like the typeface is done?
There's no done per se. Like, here, I have heard other type designers saying like, I finish my font, and it's a lot of BS, to be honest. Like, there's no way to finish a font family. It doesn't make any sense, and it doesn't mean anything to say my fonts are finished. What do you mean fonts are finished? Like, did you design all the languages available, even those that are not in the Unicode format that people have to, copy and paste the glyphs inside their design to make a sentence? Did you design all kind of weights and static and like? I know that Google fonts, they have this project. I think it's Noto, the Noto font family. I think that they try to aim to have as many languages as possible within the whole font family. It's an amazing project, but it's virtually not possible to do that. It will be one day for them to have everything encoded in a single font family, but it would take a lot of time and make a super, super massive, big file to use. and I wouldn't recommend. It doesn't make any sense, like having everything in a single file. Like it's going to make your actual computer crash or slow down. I don't know. I've not tried it, but like yeah, it doesn't make sense. There's always room for improvement. Kerning is never perfect. There's always something that you can improve. Um, but like we try to aim for something that is perfect, and that is obviously not possible to do. But it's like in life, like you aim for happiness, constant happiness, and sometimes it's not here, but you do your best to aim for that.
That's a really interesting way of looking at it. Never thought of it that way. Because like all we see is like the typeface that we get to use as a font file,
Hmm.
and then we just go about our day. Okay, we published our poster design, we published our website. I guess also it's very similar to product design where you're designing something, but there's always a new need. There's always a need to grow. There's always a problem that the user doesn't know how to do something, so we got to make it easier for them that way. But then you break something else, so you got to go back and fix that thing. So
Hmm.
it's kind of like this balancing act, like you said, but with like same thing for happiness. You're always trying to seek happiness, and you're never going to be 100% happy all the time. But it's not about the destination; it's about the journey,
Exactly,
right?
exactly. And it's a very subjective thing, or business. It's for example, when I design stuff, I always like to have font tight. The space in between, I like it tight in the font.
Same.
Um, but this is complete heresy in terms of designing font. Like you need to have something that breathes, like you need to have this white space all around the letters so they breathe in, breathe out. Um, but but aiming for this kind of font family forces all designers that want to use the font in a display manner to use either optical metrics in InDesign or kern things on their own. So it's not perfect for designers who aim for display font use, right? So and again, like in my head, when I hear finish and I hear perfect, and it's not something that exists. Like build a house and see if it's perfect and finished, man. Like you're going to spend all your weekends in that place, like fixing stuff.
But you do have to, like, in a sense, publish it, right? So you have to have at least a milestone which you're happy
Yeah,
with, right? Okay.
yeah, we do. The milestone we have is like you fix some kind of boundaries. Let's call it them this way. Like a minimum character set. Um, for example, maybe a certain number of language covered minimum, a certain quality in the design. It's basically what we call a Q&A, like is the design constant? Does the glyphs make sense? All of them. Like, do we have a glyph that looks super weird in the font family? Is the space well done? Do we have any kerning errors? Do we have any display mistakes? Do we have any installation problem? And so on. But like, if you check all these boxes, okay, we have something that is useful and can be used, but there will always be room for improvement. That's why we update the font families. That's why at some point we looked at Apoc or Cert and said, yeah, maybe we need to have more weights. Maybe we need to give people the possibility to use different weights in Apoc. Maybe we need them to be able to have, a single file to go from Roman to italic.
Hmm. That sounds like it's not consistent though through every typeface, right? Like every typeface, you're like, you know what, let's go the other way this time.
Depends, exactly. Like for example, when you look at the Blaze type catalog, there is two kind of catalog. There is the Blaze catalog with font families with a super large character set, with tons of glyphs and shapes and different stuff. And usually those are big font families with a lot of weight and styles, etc. And then you have the box, and the box is more of a playground and an experimental ground for us to use. In the box, you will find more display font families. And since we know that these font families are going to be used mainly in big sizes, um, sometimes they don't need to have a lot of weight, a lot of styles because they won't behave properly. And sometimes, like for example, in some of these font families, it doesn't make sense to design fractions because there's no way you want fractions in some of them. We do design fractions in all of them anyway, but you see my point. There's some glyphs that are not needed in super high display families. Like you want to have them in like 5 meters long, like it doesn't need to have like super tiny kind of size.
So let me ask you a really probably I don't know how many times been asked this question before. What is your least favorite typeface that you designed and that somebody else has designed?
Wow. That's a tough one. To be honest, I don't have any font family that I dislike. I mean, um, from other people, like I don't look at people's work this way, to be honest. Uh,
So you're never like, oh, that's a shitty typeface. You're
no,
like, no, okay.
no, I don't have this.
So what's your favorite then? That's not by you.
That's a really tough question, but I would go with Univers from Adrian Helvetica. It's
Classic.
yeah, it's a classic, definitely a classic. Man, it is good. Man, it's good.
Why? Why is that one good though?
Because when you look before Univer and you look at German grotesque, or you look at Neues, not Neues, but Helvetica and all this sans serif that flooded the world back then, uh, the German grotesque I feel are kind of, it's not that they are badly designed, it's like they are weird in the shapes are like very like corky in a way, like there's, you look at accidents grotesque and it has this kind of weird shapes. I don't know if it's because the digital version of what we have now is was badly done, or I've never looked at original accident grotesque cuts in real life, so I don't know the original is like this or if we have like bad digitalization, because we do have like very bad digital versions of some of the fonts, like the first versions of Helvetica that you have on your computer. Maybe not today, but back then that was like the worst kind of digital version of a font that you would imagine. Like it was crazy bad. um so when you look at the universe, it's it's constant in the way the shapes are done, and it's very human in a way. It's like when you look at, for example, the C or the S and any glyphs that have terminals, uh, it really feels like it was drawn, you know, and it doesn't feel mechanical. It really feels like you have a human being who designed it, and it has this kind of warmth that still works well today. That's why I think it's still a great font family to work with. Um, it's constant and it's still warm and it's not cold. You know, and we released the font family like we it's a shadow release again. Like we will maybe communicate and like publish stuff about it in a couple of months. I don't know. It's called Centers, and it's a mix between, it's like, okay, to make it simple, let's say we have Helvetica and you have Univer and they made a baby. And let's imagine that would be the baby. Like it's warmer than Helvetica and it's colder than Univer. And you have like a newer version that is closed terminal, and then you have a grotesque version with open terminal. But yeah, Univer is a damn good font to work with. I mean, But yeah, even for like designers who don't know how to pick fonts and are struggling with it, like you can go the Massimo Vignelli road, Like if you don't know what font families to use, like check Massimo Vignelli, and he made a whole career working with like five font families. You had Helvetica, Times, Garamond, and Dido, and I don't remember the last one. You know,
So
classic.
actually, I'm glad you brought up Helvetica because it's the world's most famous typeface,
Hmm.
uh, at least for sans serif. Um, why do we need to keep recreating typefaces similar to Helvetica when we already have the greatest typeface ever made?
Um. Okay,
And that's
so
that's a joke. I'm not saying it's that good, but it's there is something.
no, but I mean it's a very interesting argument to speak about uh, whether or not this is the greatest font of all time, because you already have to put up some things to measure this. Like, is it because like what makes a font great? Is it the uses? Is it the quality of the design? Is it because it's it made hundreds and millions of dollars? I don't know. Like, what are the metrics to measure what makes something good? Um. So okay, to answer your question, I will ask you a question.
Okay.
Do we need more clothes?
Do we need more clothing? Well, if you ask the designer, they're gonna say, "I just need black clothing." So that's a bad question to ask me, but for other people, I think that in personally, I take your side of the argument where um, there's always an opportunity to show a personality and show a different point of view in what you wear. You communicate to other people who you are by what you wear. They say, you can't judge a book by its cover, but you absolutely
Oh, you,
can, and
oh
we
yeah,
do.
definitely.
We all do it.
Yeah,
It's biologically programmed into
yeah,
us. It's not nice to say that, but that's the truth. And
definitely.
I think personally, if I was to answer the question, I'd say, yeah, of course we need more clothing. We need new designs. Some maybe we bring back the older designs, but we want to at least
It's a
have a mixture of
cycle.
options. Yeah.
So my cat is attacking me because I haven't fed her yet. Uh, Come on, I'll be back. Um, so I like the analogy that you made, that you express yourself through clothing, because in the end it's pretty much the same thing with fonts. You know, a company like I am. Uh, some times ago, I did an introduction for Slanted, and uh, I don't remember exactly what this is that I wrote, but there was an analogy with like, a brand. The logo of a brand is like their suit, for example, the way what they wear, but the font is the tone of their voice, and it's super important when you meet someone. Like the tone of the voice makes, like it's a big deal. And aside from the expression itself, like maybe we don't need more fonts, because we could definitely be working with whatever is already existing, because there's already a lot of different things to work with. But it would maybe erase a whole generation of designers that are capable of creating new amazing stuff, and suppress their voices as well. I look a lot, like we launched the box especially to promote and distribute the work of young designers from all around the world. Uh, because it's like I remember, like I remember having being 20, and it's always odd when you get out of the studies to find your first deal, the first release and everything. So we try to help youngsters releasing their first work, and have this in their background. But the what I mean is like, uh, check the box and see some of the display fonts there. I mean, some of the designers that are on the box are in their 20s, and they are crazy, crazy good at their work, and they come up with design like this that I would have never ever considered. Like it's insane how good they are at imagining some shapes, even for sense. Like if you see Dudler, it's like this weird reinterpretation of avant-garde Gothic, but it's insane. The shapes, the way it's designed, the angle and everything. It's like I look at it and I'm like I'm amazed at the designer behind it. Like, how did you come up with that? You know? So yeah, we need more funds. Like we need more people to try type design and work their way around it. That's also why we released the book to teach people how to design fonts, and that's why we priced it as cheap as possible. It's because like design studies are super expensive, especially the type design one, and there's not a lot of schools teaching that. There's few resources online. Most of the classes that teach you the workshop and everything are super expensive. So, I think like having a decent book and some time to study is actually all you need.
And especially the motivation to practice.
Yeah, definitely. You need to do that every day.
Yeah. I wish I had time. My final project in school was to create a typeface.
Oh.
I asked my professor and I worked with him on creating a typeface together, and I never finished it. It was just the exploratory nature of like figuring out how to actually do it, going from pencil and paper to digital, and it's incredibly fascinating. And I really do wish I finished it. Maybe one day I'll go back and I'll make one. But right now I'm more in the product world and trying to do all that kind of stuff. So right now it's a dream of mine, but I'll get to it one day. So I have one last question because I know we have to wrap up soon. The entire podcast, every episode I ask this, the entire podcast is about how you're shaping the world of design. I'd like to ask you, how has the world of design shaped you?
I think it made me more humble in a way. Showed me like the world of design when you experience this work in your very self. I think it changes you. Like you don't see the world in the same manner as before. It's not only about like whether or not this chair is functionable or not. It's like you try to see the beauty in everything around you, and you don't overlook stuff, I think. So that's what I try to do now. Is I try to not overlook things that I used to not care much about when I was younger. Because there's inspiration in everything around, and the world is full of surprise.
I love that answer. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you for coming on the pod. This was an amazing podcast. I love getting into detail. We'll have to do part 2 of like a super advanced, like detailed, how do you draw an O or something like that. But
sure, this time I'll share my screen. No worries.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. That'd be awesome.
We can definitely do that. We can talk about that later. If you have some people that would be interested in it, we can definitely do something like that in later months, for sure.
Perfect. All right. Appreciate it. Thank you.
My pleasure.